Good morning, friends, and welcome to today's Cichlids and Coffee. Oh, yeah. Hope you're drinking your favorite beverage wherever you are. And welcome to today's Cichlids and Coffee live stream. I see that Whip has said hi to everybody, so I don't need to say hi to anybody. So, oh, hello, Whip. Good to have you here, my friend. Mitty Mac in the house? Yep, he's on a roll, isn't he? That's good. Ex-Collie Kev. Hey, Ex-Collie. Nice to see you, my friend. Z-Zip in the house. Angelo. Resin Fishes. Love it. Morning to you, my friend. Wally's in the house. Wally's Freshwater Aquatics. Was that Elfish? Elfish Tanks, hello all to you. Luke's Aquatics is here. Ronald's here. Michael's here. Hey, Brian. Good to see you, buddy. Hey, Jerry. How are you, buddy? Going to go get some fish? Lucky you. Hey, Lady Deanne. Good to see you. Ex-Collie and Whips. Okay, and more folks are getting on, and that's a good thing. It is very... Hey, Von Lurker. Von Lurker. It is very hot here. And is it hot where you're at? It's very hot here. It's going to be in the 90s. And, of course, with the humidity, it feels like in the hundreds. Another Ben. There's a Ben on. Good morning to you, my friend. Good to see you. Ben Boudin. Boudin, did I pronounce that right? And Zane Patney on. We got some new names here. I love it. Just bought a 125 as my first tank. Way to go. Go big or go home. 125. That's a great size. That size allows you so much flexibility. You could get into African cichlids like these. You can create a beautiful planted community. You can get into good-sized rainbows. I mean, it's just gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. All right. So let's see here where we go from here. Let's just go ahead and let's go ahead and launch it. What do you say? Now it's official. Now we're rocking and rolling. All right. So I haven't, sometimes I'll blitz comments. There's a feature on my sort of like my landing page for my YouTube channel where I can concentrate just on comments. And certainly over the years, there have been some comments that have been funny, strange, but a lot of them that have been like good questions that in some cases might have inspired a video. Might have gotten my brain thinking. I mean, I get my inspiration for content comes primarily from two sources. Three sources. It comes from what's going on here in the fish room, reporting to you on and communicating with you about what the current scene is in here. It also comes from the comments that you make under the videos. You inspire something. You spark some idea in my head. And it also comes from other YouTube content creators who might say something in passing during one of their videos, and it just sort of sparks an idea in my mind about how maybe that's something that maybe could be talked some more about. That I could get into that a little bit more. I could expand on that, and those are like the three the three ways that I usually get onto a topic. It doesn't mean that sometimes an idea doesn't just come to me, because it does. I'll be sitting somewhere and go, wow, that would be an interesting angle. Let me talk about that. Now, that being said, I have a video coming out this afternoon that's going to include clips from two fish keepers that I'm sure you're familiar with. Corey over at the Aquarium Co-op, and John over at KG Tropicals. Both of them recently released topics having to do with what their thoughts are about where they are at this stage as fish keepers and as YouTube content creators. And it certainly sparked something in me, something that I had been kind of rolling around in my head for a while. And so you're going to see that video this afternoon, and it's me talking about where I'm at as a YouTube creator and someone who shares content, and how that ties into where Corey and John find themselves currently as participants in this game called YouTube. So hope you folks can tune in for that, and that should be uploaded and ready to go public this afternoon. On Sunday, there's probably going to be a walkthrough of the fish room, even though I'm thinking about possibly doing a walkthrough during today's live stream. Just show you what's going on. Everything's pretty stable and steady, and including, fortunately, the beasts behind me. They're behaving, and knock on wood for that. You can see the eye biter here over my shoulder, being a good guy, and I did have some concerns about eye biters. And the other fish, the Buccochromis notitania, is not being harassed by the Buccochromis rhodesii yellow, which I was concerned about because they are both buccos, and when fish are similar, very often they can go after each other. But you can see the little bucco going into my ear there and coming out of my ear. He's right there. Beautiful fish. Love that fish. And this recent batch, the sort of core fish in the tank were originally from James over at the shack, Cichlid Shack in Arizona. Not sure what James is up to right now, but I know he went through a rough patch there. Hopefully he's back. But now the more recent additions, the eye biter, the red empress, right there, the red empress, and there's a couple others in there, the bucco, the eye biter. Anyway, the four recent additions are from James, from Josh over at Cunningham Tropicals, and I still think of him as Cunningham Cichlids. I actually met him at an American Cichlid Association meeting. He was hanging out with Jay Wilson. Someone who was at that time pretty prominent on YouTube. He's gone off into other directions now and is doing a lot of work with Cichlids, but just a great guy. Jay Wilson, check him out. Check him out on YouTube. He still has a lot of great old content out there on African cichlids. All right, so let's see here. So let's I'm going to take up some of the comments, some comments that I've I don't know what would be the right word, that I harvested. Some comments that I pulled from all the comments that are out there, and let me change the image here. And they're not in any particular order. They're not from most intriguing to least intriguing, but they were just interesting comments that I think need discussion, and they'll take us into different directions. But the first comment here is from Jake Beckett. I have a blue Niasi peacock who is slightly bigger than most of my fish, summer juveniles. I'm only just starting out, but he guards an entire half of my tank, constantly chasing all the other fish offered through. I think he's actually second in the hierarchy. One of the other peacocks does chase him off, but doesn't really challenge him. How do I know he won't settle? I'm not totally against removing him, but I want to give him a chance. He's been in about 2 weeks now, and wish new fish being, with new fish being added. So he's got 18 peacocks in a 55 gallon. That's a good number of peacocks in a 55, which is not a very large tank. And it's a good question. I'm sure you folks here in the chat can chime in, maybe give some advice. My concern is this. First of all, are any fish looking torn up? If fish are looking torn up, marks on the side where they've lost scales from being hit, fin damage in the lips from lip locking, if there's anything like that going on, certainly you may need to speed up the timetable on removing that fish. Number one, point number one. Number two is that it's going to create problems that go beyond just aggression. Those fish might end up being very reluctant to eat. So be sure that when you feed them, you're dropping food on, if it's a traditional 55 gallon, open up both of the top doors and be sure that you're spreading food around at the far ends of the aquarium, and be sure to use some floating and some sinking, some floating pellets and some sinking pellets or some flakes. And that way everybody's going to get a shot at the food. Because what will happen is these fish are going to be stressed, and that's already going to predispose them to illness. You might start seeing some sunken bellies, right? Because maybe some parasites will get a little bit worked up, right? In the stress of the situation. So you're predisposing your fish to illness. You might inadvertently be starving the fish because they're afraid to challenge for food. So just keep an eye on that. If everybody's eating, there's no signs of real damage, you can let it go for a while and see what it's like. Now, if it's impacting your enjoyment, if you're just not enjoying the experience of sitting in your aquarium because you're sort of suffering with those fish that are corralled to one side by the bully, that might be another reason to accelerate moving that fish out. I've certainly tried everything, right? But right, lowering temperatures, redecorating, a timeout, taking them out, waiting a month, putting them back in with the decor moved around. I've tried just about everything, and if a fish is truly a bully, he's going to be a bully. So I end up taking him to the local fish store, or dedicating an aquarium that, if you love the fish, you think he's beautiful, you want to keep him, because it does sound like you have a real good tank boss. Sounds like you have a mellow tank boss, and that's really cool. So if that number 2 spot, someone's going to move up into that number 2 spot if you remove them, by the way. So you might have another set of problems. But assuming that if you remove them, things calm down, you could dedicate a tank for him if you really love him. He could probably live okay in a 40. Maybe a peacock could be okay by himself in a 40. Maybe throw a bushy nose in there, or maybe 2 or 3 females and breed them. I mean, I don't know. Could be it could open a door to another adventure for you. All right. Question number 2. Cindy Young Shmeki. Ben, I have to admit that if I buy a fish at a fish store, I do quarantine them. However, I buy online from Dan. I don't quarantine because I feel he is such a responsible seller. Am I playing with fire? And you can guess what I meant, what I told Cindy. Dan is 100% legit. He quite possibly medicates when he receives new fish. I'm pretty sure he quarantines for a long period and really observes the fish and maybe runs them through a medication process, right? The problem though is that sometimes in the stress of transport, in the stress of shipping, because sometimes the fish are not fed because the shippers don't want them to be producing waste in the bag during the shipment. So the fish is already a little bit on the weak side. And then you ship them. And who knows how they're tossed. Overhand, underhand, who knows how they're tossed when they're shipped. So those fish can arrive stressed. And like I mentioned earlier, under stress, something a fish is carrying that was being kept in check by the fish's by its own immune system, now whatever it's carrying can take hold, whether it's parasites or who knows, some kind of a disease, velvet, colomaris, who knows, right? It can catch, it can take hold. We keep our fingers crossed, and over the years of fish keeping, yes, I've added fish directly. When I didn't have the room to quarantine, or all my quarantine tanks were occupied, and I trusted the fish provider. But man, oh man, I crossed my fingers. And I mentioned to Whip in a comment that I responded to that I was that I paid the price for that one time. I mean, I lost like 50% of my stock to imported colomaris. So yes, I think you're rolling the dice. You're probably rolling the dice less with Dan than you would be with other fish providers, because I know he's very conscientious, and he works real hard on having like a 100% alive arrival rate. I mean, he keeps track of that. He shares the numbers with the public in his live streams. So he's probably one of the best that you could do that with, but I still would quarantine. I trust Josh, right? I mean, Josh has sent me some amazing fish, those blue Congos that had an amazing recovery from being shipped. That took a fish that was very, very strong. I mean, they were upside down, straight up and down in the bag. I thought at least half of them were going to die. They all bounced back after they got acclimated, temperature matched, and added to a bigger aquarium with better oxygen. They all bounced back. That's a real good sign of quality and good stock. I still quarantine them for 30 days. So that's sort of where I'm at on it. All right, next question. And thank you to those of you who do provide these questions. I think I do warn you that I might use your question in a video. Now here's somebody, Delon Johnson, who says, spending $300 for a canister when you can build a conservative sump for the same price is like paying $80,000 for a 96 Jeep. No offense to all of you out there who have 96 Jeeps. I think that is a year that did have a tip over problem in 96. But Delon, I see his point. And my comment on that is that there's for people that don't know about sumps, they're intimidating. People can be afraid of sumps. They're afraid of floods. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of the mystery. Like anything that you're unfamiliar with, but yet is important to you, if you're lacking knowledge, you're going to have anxiety. And an inability to predict is a working definition for anxiety. Where's your kid? Your 9-year-old was supposed to be here at 3 p.m. He's not here. There's no message on your cell. You have anxiety. An inability to predict creates anxiety. So you have to familiarize yourself with sumps. Some people don't want to drill their tanks. Some people don't have drill tanks. Some people don't feel comfortable with bulkheads. Some people are not aware of the overflow boxes that are available that can substitute for a drilled tank. You don't need to have a drilled tank. There are overflow boxes that can work like on the same principle of a hang-on back, except that the motor, the pump for your hang-on back, is under your aquarium inside of a big aquarium. Same principle as a sump. But again, people are not familiar. They need to become familiar. They get comfortable. They learn how to set it up. They set it up in a way that makes it almost impossible to overflow. These two tanks here, my 300 and my 210 on my left, both have sumps and canisters. And you'd have to really work hard to... The only time I think my sumps would ever overflow is right before I go away for a long weekend, let's say, and I have somebody watching my tanks. I fill those sumps to the brim. I fill them above the safety line. See, because normally if they're running at the safety line and I have a total power outage and the tank drains below the outputs, right? It drains, and I have one-way valves on the return. So they can't just keep siphoning water into the sump. So at the safety line on the sump, if the power goes out, the water will fill up to the top of the sump, but it will not overflow. Because at that point, the siphon's been broken and nothing's going to keep siphoning. However, right before I go on vacation, because I know there's going to be evaporation and nobody here to fill the sump, I do fill the sumps to the very top. And if we had a power outage at that time perfectly, I'd have water underneath the tank. So, but at any rate, now there's a solution for that too. You can buy what are called auto top-off units. And if I can figure out a way to get an auto top-off underneath the sump, or underneath inside the cabinet and sitting on the sump, if I can figure that out, like I had in California, I was using one in California, I'll go ahead and put an auto top off. And that way I can go on vacation, not worry, because there's like 5 extra gallons that will drip into the sump if the little valve gets triggered. If the water line goes down, it opens the valve and then it'll drip water into the sump until the valve gets pushed up again and turns the auto top off, turns it back off. So anyway, I think, Delon, for folks that are not familiar with how sumps operate, it's worth it to them to pay $300 because they're more confident with a canister. Now, that being said, canisters can also leak. I keep mine in big Rubbermaid containers. I have Watchdog water sensors that go off if there's a leak. And I have a whole playlist. One of the moderators can share it. I have a whole playlist on Sun, on FX6s, and on canisters in general on how to set them up to remove the possibility of a leak and also to have them run efficiently and quietly. So there you go, Delon. Thank you for that question. Our next question comes from J.T. Cooper. J.T. Cooper, who comments under a lot of my videos. I appreciate that, J.T. I have tanks with both sponge filters and HOBs, and since I'm old school, I also use under gravel filters on some of these. For those of you not familiar, under gravel filters are filters that are under the sand, under the gravel. You really don't want to use sand, you probably use gravel, and it just pulls water down through the substrate and collects detritus on the bottom, and it has airline tubing on the sides, and that airline tubing, as it goes up, produces suction in the plate below the substrate, and it's pulling detritus through the substrate. Great for a planted tank because it produces this bed of food for plants, and they'll run their roots down there. So under gravel filters were actually kind of cool. A lot of work to install, and I used to say a lot of work to service because you've got to get in there and take it. But you know what? Once you set them up, if you have plants, just leave them alone. Don't touch them. And just let that detritus feed your plants, and you'll be fine. It's not going to be a nitrate factory. So under gravels, HOBs, sponge filters, I have they've all served me well over the last 36 years, and that's why I like them, and we'll continue to use them in and on aquariums. Thanks for the video. So, you know, I mentioned in that last video, the right filter for you is the one that you feel comfortable with, you can afford, does the job that you're looking for, right? That you can do maintenance on. Like if you have real bad back problems, don't get a heavy canister. I'd even say avoid getting a sump because you're going to have to be bending over and doing stuff. If you have back problems, get hang-on back filters that you don't even have to bend over. You just work on them. If you need a lot of water movement, let's say you have corals or, internal filters are great. So sponge filters, again, easy maintenance. No weight involved. Pull them out, rinse them in the sink. So the right filter is the one you feel comfortable with, you can afford, does the job. Those are the ones. Those are the best filters. And thank you, JT Cooper, for the comment. I mean, you could make a video probably about each one of these comments, right? And I'm going to get to your questions and your comments. If you have a question or a comment that you want me to see, put my name first in the comments so it's highlighted. That way when I'm scrolling through the chat, it'll jump out at me, okay? I mean, some of you already do that. And by the way, if I missed a super chat, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention. But any super chats today are going to go into the Save Lucy Fund. One of my beagles, a lemon beagle named Lucy, is 15 years old, and she's developed some open sores on an ear. I took her to the vet. If you've been to the vet, have you been to the vet recently? Talk about inflation. You think prices at the grocery store are high. Take your dog to the vet or your cat, and you'll get an inflation education. So today's super chats will go into the Save Lucy Fund. And she already went to the vet once. Her heart and lungs were good. And that's amazing for a 15-year-old beagle. If you've had beagles, you know what I'm talking about. All right, let's see here. Placing, okay. This is from Jay. Jay, remedy, please. Placing the sponge as a pre-filter is great. This is a comment on that hang-on back by Phoenix. I did a video on the hang-on back filter by Phoenix. Hang-on back is my preference over canisters and sponges. I use all of the above in addition to power heads or even a lightly stocked aquarium with no filter. That looks like a cute little addition. Yeah. I like that. I like that Phoenix I like that Phoenix hang on back. I'll tell you the main reason I like it. Because I was using a different kind before. I had a brand that was sent to me, a very, very small hang on back, like a micro hang on back. And I've got an old video on it. But that hang on back, in the event of a glitch in power, and during extreme weather here in Tennessee, sometimes we get power outages. Not that many, and knock on wood again, knock on wood, not that many in the last year or so. Especially after I went out and bought that 1200 watt propane power generator. We haven't had any big power outages, of course, right? Once you're prepared. But at any rate, if there's a power glitch, just a little flicker, that old hang on back wouldn't start up again. But the motor would run. So you'd end up with this real hot water and a stinky sponge and no water circulating. So this one from Phoenix, you can unplug it, let it sit for a second, plug it in, and keep testing it. And it fires up, it fires up, it fires up, and starts running. That, to me, is a huge plus point. So, canisters, every time I service my Marineland 400s, the Emperor 400s, on the 90 gallon and on the 55. It's two things amaze me. One, how much detritus is in there, how much gunk those filters capture, and number two, how easy it is to get so much water turnover and filtration going. Again, you don't have to bend over. You're working at shoulder length, and and I'm able to have sponges in there for internal filters. I shove them in there so I have immediate seeded media if I need to fire up an aquarium. So I love hang-on backs, as you probably know. All right, here's a question from is that JL? Get my eyes here. JL644. I'm struggling to keep nitrates because my aquarium is full of plants. I need 30 parts per million. Now, I put this question in here because it's so funny, because the struggle that we have as when you're someone keeping African cichlids, the struggle is lowering nitrates. And he or she has a struggle here on keeping nitrates up. And I think that's kind of funny in contrast to the struggle that we have, right? Because we can't keep plants with these kinds of beasts like the ones behind me, because they simply dig them up and destroy them. But somebody with that problem, someone who needs to bring their nitrates up, I know what you're going to recommend. Add a few more fish, feed a little more. Maybe take a little longer between water changes and cleanings. There are what you simply do is you take everything we've ever talked about reducing nitrates, and just reverse that. Smaller water changes and skip a week, right? Feed a little more. Feed a little more often. Add a few more fish. Your nitrates will come up. You'll watch. Those nitrates will come up. I guarantee you. All right, one more question here. Pulled, curated. That's a good word. Another question that was curated from your comments. This is from Joseph Gadway. I've been keeping fish for 39 years. No breaks. A heater cooked one of my aquariums early on, and so I've been keeping goldfish ever since. No heater. Now, to me, this was a very interesting comment, and I'll tell you why. Here's a person whose fish keeping hobby took an entirely different direction because of a heater failure. And I get it. I get it. And this is not a knock on goldfish. I think goldfish are cool. I'm not too crazy about the big, sort of lumpy ones that have been bred as sort of like ornamental, decorative, and would probably not stand a chance of surviving in nature, right? They're not something that would have evolved from a Darwin sense, like a survival of the fittest. I mean, they're just these little sort of fat little things that just sort of kind of putt around the aquarium. Not too crazy about those, even though they can be kind of cute. The red-headed ones are kind of cute. I like the small koi, the small koi goldfish. I think those are really pretty. That shape, that torpedo shape of a koi. But this person might still be collecting or involved in a variety of tropical fish if they had a controller, a heater controller on their aquarium. Something you can pick up relatively inexpensively. Now, you can get heavy duty ones, for $100 or more, or you can buy relatively inexpensive ones. And, just there's a whole range out there. But if you had a temperature controller that would have cut off the power to the heater when the tank temperature hits the top limit, and you set the top limit. My aquariums are set at around 82 as a top limit. The reason I set 82 is that if I ever want to increase the temperature a little bit for ick or something, right? Or maybe they're set 85. But at any rate, I set a top limit, and I know that my heaters, if the thermostat sticks and the heater doesn't turn off, like happened with a heater I had before that I ended up doing a rant on in a video short, which I normally don't do rants, but I felt I had to. But that one killed a beautiful red-spotted gold severum that was in quarantine. And the tank got up to 92 degrees, and that poor fish didn't have a chance. But a controller would have shut the power off, and maybe Joseph would have ended up, maybe he would have ended up in goldfish anyway. I don't know. But at any rate, something that can be avoided. I highly recommend controllers, especially on tanks that are your show tanks that are stocked, with fish that would be difficult for you to replace. And when you add up the value of those fish, you're like, I don't know. I mean, the average cost of what a 7-inch cichlid, African cichlid, is about $50 to $75. So my replacement cost back here would be very, very high. So $100 for a heavy duty controller that's rated for 1500 watts. Be sure that you match up the controller rating with the size of the heaters, because you don't want to exceed the rating of the controller and blow out your controller. So there you go. I hope all that is helpful. And let's take up some of your questions. I'm going to cruise the chat here and see what you've got here. Alishana, yes, I still run old style Whisper hang-on backs. I had the Whisper hang-on back. I think it was the 90 series. I had the biggest one they make. I got a couple of them, and I had the 60-gallon in California in a TV room, which I really enjoyed because you could watch TV and watch your fish, and sometimes I'd play Lake Malawi videos, and the fish would all go to side of the aquarium and look at the Lake Malawi video. It was hilarious. But at any rate, the whispers, I bought them from Chewy, and Chewy is real good about issuing refunds and taking care of its customers. So I wrote back to him and I said, look, the splashing is too loud. These hang-on backs don't whisper. They actually shout. And so they quickly credited my account, and I went out and I got 2 Sun, I think it was 305 or 304s. No, 302s. 2 Sun 302s, 302Bs, and put them on that 60-gallon, and they worked wonderful for like 3 or 4 years, and then I sold the tank with the canisters. But they do create a lot of water movement and a lot of surface breakup, so you're going to have a lot of oxygen and a lot of water movement with those whisper filters. All right, so if you want to ask a question, go ahead and put my name on there. Yeah, thank you, JT Cooper. I appreciate it. It looks like somebody asked a question and then changed their mind. All the way to the back. Okay, so if you have any questions, go ahead and put my name and then the question. Dixon Designs. You can't go wrong with Aquarium Co-op, one of their little mini sponges. You can't go wrong with those for an aquarium that size. Now, also, a little nano hang-on back wouldn't be a bad idea either. You know, kind of cute, and all you have going into the aquarium is just one little tube, right? So that might be a good idea too. So if you go to Aquarium Co-op, you can see both of them. You can see the Phoenix hang-on back, and I think they do have 2 sizes, and you can look at their little nano sponge. And like I mentioned in the video, with the nano sponge, you're also going to need a pump. So you've got the added cost of the pump, but you have the added advantage that you can have a backup titanium battery-powered pump, so that in the event of a power outage, you still have, like, you know, a day of filtration and water movement without having to worry. And if you folks want to chime in on this question, I'll go ahead and pin the message, and you folks can chime in on Dick Sign's question there. Price Tag wants to get a title. Now, are titles the ones that are made by, are they the CChem title, Price Tag? And I think that if that's the one, then that motor is made by Cichlids. So it's a really good quality unit. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it's the CChem. Is it the CChem title? Because if it is, it's got a Cichlids motor, and that's a made in Italy, great motor, great pump. One of the problems I'm having with my internal filters that are currently in the 55-gallon where I have my red tear is that they raise the temperature of the aquarium. Whenever you have a motor pump that is inside the aquarium, you have the advantage that you're probably not going to get a leak because everything's in the tank, right? So if there's a leak, it's going to leak into the aquarium. If the O-ring, right, the little gasket fails. But the disadvantage is that your electrical unit is inside the aquarium, so you can get possibly a little bit of electrical current in the aquarium, and also it produces heat. One of the reasons why I don't think I have to heat, or I don't see the heaters on that often in the 210 and the 300, is that the Cichlids pumps and the canister filters are producing heat, and they produce so much heat that they actually work to some degree as heaters. Those tanks, they stay at 78 degrees, 80 degrees without the heaters going on. So there you go. It looks like I got hit with a super chat. Let's take a look at that. Thank you so much for that. And it looks from X8 Arcats. Arscats. I don't know. I give up. I'm sorry. But thank you so much for that super chat. Hey, Ben, I recently bought 2 reed fish and they both died same day after a week. Then bought 2 more. Same thing happened. Other fish in tank are fine. Kind of lost why only these keep dying. Now, first of all, I would go back and explain the situation to the provider, to the fish store, and check the water parameters of that tank. Maybe you're putting the reed fish either through a big pH shift or possibly putting the reed fish in conditions that are very non-optimal. So I would check that first. It's possible that your provider got a bad batch of reed fish. So I'd ask the provider. Ask them what do they think might be going on, and find out if they've had any deaths, and have them tell you what's the pH in the tank that they're keeping them in. What's the temp? You might, it sounds like they're getting some kind of a shock of some kind, even though I would expect them to die pretty instantly after a pH shift. So, and it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking today's topic was almost going to be fish I can't keep. And over the years, I've had some fish that for some reason I can't keep them. And one was rams. For some reason, I kill rams. I don't know why. Maybe I run my tanks too warm. Maybe I don't run them warm enough. Rams don't last for me. I've had problems with starry night. The paratilapia. I've had trouble with the Madagascar paratilapias, the Polinis, for some reason. But in those cases, it was changes in the aquarium circumstances that killed them off. So I'm willing to give those a third try. But there have been fish over time that have been difficult for me that I reached a point where, I don't know. I'm not gonna keep that fish. I had a electric blue Jack Dempsey. Fell in love with that little fish. Was eating well, active, flipped over and dies. Then I start doing research, and again, closing the barn after the horse left. I start doing research on electric blue Jack Dempseys, and I find out that particular breed, not always, because there are exceptions, and several people chimed in and said, no, mine's been around for 5 years, but there were a lot of comments about how fast they die and how they just don't have a long life, and they attribute it to the sort of genetic changes that the fish went through to get that electric blue coloration. So there you go. But thank you for that super chat. It'll go into the Save Lucy Fund. All right, let's see some more questions here. Well, Jay, that's a good problem, Jay. Jay's having a problem with a lot of breeding going on and a lot of babies. First of all, 2 things. One, that's a good sign. You obviously have good water conditions. because usually poor water conditions, one of the first things that stops is breeding. Second, to your question, usually local fish stores will take them when they get up, around an inch and a half. Local fish stores, you bag them up, take them in, and you can work out maybe I'd talk to them first, but you can work out a credit. They'll give you a store credit, and that's an idea. There are also local fish clubs, platforms, Craigslist, right? There are places where you can post that you have a certain kind of fish and that's been bred locally. And usually that kind of fish is very desirable because people want fish that are acclimated to local water. So they'll want that fish. They'll want your fish. So you got a lot of ways to go. Hey, Zen Ginger, good to see you in the house. Who else here? Who else has jumped in? Homer the Clown Trigger's here. Jake Marshall's here. Wayne, let me see. Waynard Walmoran's jumped in. Stephen P203 Awkwardice is here. Eric's here. Oh. Yeah, Eric, you're right. I mean, I do the old drop and flop, but certainly if you discover that there's a drastic pH change, you can do more of a slow acclimation, more of like a drip acclimation. There is the problem with drip acclimation on ship that were fished, on fish that were shipped, is that the accumulation of gases in the bag can create when you open the bag and all of a sudden a lot of fresh O2 rushes in there, you can create an ammonia spike. It's an interesting sort of chemical change that occurs. And this is why people tend to avoid the drip acclimation on fish that were shipped. And they do the flop and drop, right? Which I normally do. But certainly, for example, in the saltwater community, with things like shrimp and corals, I've heard, stingrays, there is a slow drip where they'll start to add water from the aquarium slowly to what the fish came in and have that fish acclimate both in temperature and pH. All right. I am cruising the chat. Michael Wells says that for him it was the electric blue Acaras and the green terrors. Yeah, green terrors, it's funny. You see a real big green terror. It's a little bit rare because it takes a while to really get them to that size. I think even Cichlid Bros lost a beautiful big... oh, no, wait a minute. That was Jack Dempsey, I think they lost. But it takes a while. It takes a while to get him up to that big size. John Lynch wants to know my opinion on Carib Sea original mix with crushed shell and coral. I like it. It's good for buffering. I had it in a Mabuna tank, and the Mabuna would move those pieces of shell around and carry them, and it was hilarious to watch. It does accumulate detritus like any large piece gravel would. In other words, you'll get gunk building up in there. It's not like sand where the gunk gets kind of stopped at the surface, and you can use a power head or a wave maker to kind of sweep it and move it towards the intakes. You will have to do some deep vacuuming from time to time, but I think it's great. I like Carib Sea. I mean, they're a quality outfit, I think. Homer, the clown trigger. Dempsey's had a problem with Dempsey. Electric blue, Dempsey's. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think sometimes when these fish are genetically modified, they lose some of their natural ability to fight off certain things. Wow, now that really turns it into a mystery. The reed fish mystery. The only other thing I can think of is that you might have a bacteria or a virus in your aquarium that your fish are acclimated to, that have built up resistance to, but that the reed fish can't tolerate. That would be my next guess. If you want to take it a step further, consider adding a UV to your aquarium, and that'll take care of the viruses and any deadly bacteria in that your fish might be acclimated to, bacteria in the water column. Put like a killing green machine. There's a thing called the big green killing machine, I think it's called, or whatever it is. And I've got one up here. Let me see. The right name is get the 24 watt. Don't bother with the smaller one. Get the 24 watt green killing machine. Put it in there. Let it run for a month, and then throw some reeds in there and see what happens. Because again, sometimes it's almost like the opposite of picking up local fish, like from your streams and lakes. You pick up a fish, and then you go ahead and you quarantine the fish, and then you add them to an established tank, and all your fish die because that fish has an immunity to some virus that they spread to your other fish, and your other fish don't have a chance, and they all die. So this is what happened when Columbus arrived in the New World. They brought STDs with them, and it wiped out large segments of the indigenous population in these places, in these islands like the Caribbean, because they had no immunity, zero immunity to these diseases. And whereas in Europe, they had built up hundreds of years of some resistance, right? So these, like I think in some of the islands, all the indigenous people were wiped out. So anyway, it's just an odd thing how that works, but in some cases, very deadly. Eric says that reed fish are very sensitive to pH swings. Drip acclimate. Good tip. J Milo. They are peacocks and crazy hybrid firemouth, a firemouth and convict breed. Yeah, that would be a bit of a nut job. The only thing that could make that probably crazier would be if it was an albino. An albino mix of those fish. It's like, have you ever seen an albino eye biter? Or an albino OB eye biter? Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. But I'm almost positive that they would lose their minds. It would be just a matter of time before that trigger would get pulled and you'd be off to the races. Whip says that he's tried to keep the electric blue Ochara and the Jack Dempsey 3 times. And 3 times they did great for a couple months. And then they hit that. Yep. They give you just enough time to fall in love with them. Just enough time to fall in love with them. And in my case, make a couple videos talking about them. And then they're gone. Very frustrating and disappointing. Do I think there's such a thing? Jacob wants to know, do I think there's such a thing as too much water movement in a Malawi tank? Now, I heard, and this makes sense, that some of the more, like if you look at where they hang out in Lake Malawi, some of your flatter fish, like your eye biters, don't like a lot of current, just like your angelfish, your discus. And that sort of stands to reason because they're going to get blown around a lot. Like if you look in the tank behind me, if you look back there, I've got a couple fish. Let me put the let me put on the fish cam. Hold on. And I'll move out of the way. If you look at the fish in the tank behind me, there's really only that eye biter that you see right there in the middle is the only fish that you would call like a tall flat fish. And I've got enough standing artificial plants and rocks where it kind of breaks the strong output from the wave maker, which is on a timer, and those powerful outlets. I have two C-shaped pumps in the sump. I think they're pumping at about, I don't know, maybe about 1,100 gallons an hour each. And then I've got that wave maker that comes on. But you see, he's not getting blown around a lot. He's swimming right by the FX output. But the other fish in here, like that trout, even that hawk, even though he seems a little taller, flatter, let's call him over. Look at that fire hap. That fire hap. Beautiful fish. There's the buco. Anyway, you get the idea. So you just have to kind of be sensible about it. If you have a lot of tall, flat fish, yes. If not, then you're probably okay. You can go ahead and go to town with a lot of movement. Probably another question that would also be worth asking is there too much turnover, or can you over-filter an aquarium? And again, it kind of depends on what your intention is. If you think that over-filtering is going to increase the biological the bacteria, then you're mistaken, because you're only going to get as much beneficial bacteria as you're feeding, and as the waste produced by the fish can sustain. So you can waste money, and in the form of energy, utilities, units, right? Canister units. You can waste money on filtration that's unnecessary. I think if you're in the 5 to 10 gallons per hour, so if you have a 100-gallon aquarium, if you're turning over the water 500 to 1,000 gallons an hour, you're okay. You're going to be in that sweet spot. Now, keep in mind that the advertised gallons per hour on your filters is not going to be the performance you're going to get after you stuff those filters with media, and that media starts to get blocked. Or if you're coming from a pump and a sump, the head pressure, the amount of distance of the hosing from the pump to the return line, that's gonna cut back on the gallons per hour. Just things to keep in mind. All right. Did I answer your question, or did I confuse matters even more? Well, TA420, is that NK? What's your guys and gals' opinion on using pool filter sand as a substrate? Now, when you say pool filter sand, are you talking about diatomaceous earth? Seeing people use it more and more lately, probably because it's cheap. And you know they have a diatomaceous earth that is food grade. And I would suggest you get food grade. It's very clean, and you know it's going to be safe for your fish if it's food grade. You're going to have to rinse it for a very long time because you're going to get a lot of dust. But it looks good. And I think I just saw a video by the king of DIY. I think Joey, he just finished that 15, 16 foot long plywood tank. And I think he put pool sand. He put pool sand in it. So the only complaint I've heard is that it might be a little bit abrasive on the gill plates of fish that like to sift, like your geos and African cichlids. But maybe not, because I also hear other people saying I've been using it for years and I love it. Same thing with black diamond sand. I mean, this is a sand that is intentionally coarse because it's designed as an abrasive, like the sand that's attached to sandpaper. But people use it and they say it's okay. Whereas the sand that you get from Carib Sea, they say is tumbled. They tumble it a lot so that it's all very soft and has no sharp edges, and fish can sift it without any possible abrasion to the lips and the gills. So again, your call. For every post that says it might be abrasive, you're going to get 5 posts that say, no, it's safe. I've been using it for years. So again, you got to make your call on it. Eric wants to know about my water changes. It kind of depends on where nitrates are running and whether or not I have plants in the aquarium. My planted tanks get about a 20%, roughly, about a 20% water change every other week. My South and Central American tanks get 40 to 60%, depending on nitrate readings, every other week, but they get a top off of the sump in the midweek. So they are getting fresh diluting water in the middle of the week. But otherwise, they go for 2 weeks and they get 40 to 60% depending. And, 150, 200 gallon water change on a 300 gallon tank, that's a lot of water. That's a long time to drain and a long time to fill. So I'll usually do one of the big tanks at once. Yeah, have you folks heard of this Vortex diatom filter? Vortex diatom? I was talking to Denny about it, and apparently it's an old school filter. You can still find them on the internet every now and then, places like eBay, but apparently they are unbelievable water clarifiers, and they use the pool sand. They use the diatomaceous earth. There you have it. JT Cooper, my last electric blue Ochart, lived for 5 years. I'd love to get several people with 5-year-old electric blue, Jack Dempsey's. Get several of them together, get a male and female, and start breeding those long-living electric blue Jack Dempsey's. I think that you'd have a little bit of a gold mine there. You could market them as long-living JD electric blue JDs. Good day to you, Uncle Balls. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you and your family are well out there. I'm cruising the chat. I'll go back to the chat screen as I do some cruising. Well, I certainly saw, Jay, I saw a group of clams clear up a cloudy aquarium one time. If you search it on YouTube, you can see the video. It was crazy. So there is a thing called freshwater clams. Just don't use them with big puffers, because they'll become a snack real quick. But yeah, I think that it's a viable option if you can find them. Is Vortex still around? Alishan AS, is Vortex still in business, or were they bought out or changed their name? Whip's World, I'm not sure what happens there. I'm not sure why they go from a bulletproof fish to a fragile fish. I mean, you start messing with genetics and stuff, it's wild. It's wild. We don't know. Wait till we start getting a lot of genetically modified people. I mean, we might end up with X-Men. We might end up with The Boys, if you follow that show on HBO. Or you might end up with folks that die at age 30. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll probably live long enough to see some of that. Aquaballs picked up some Black Widow frontosas. Very good looking frontosas. Put them in a 120. Are you going to put some more fronts in there? Maybe get some of those blue frontosas. Those are beautiful too. But spiders are awesome. Homer the Clown Trigger. Yes, I agree. Cisse pumps are amazing. Ronald says that he gave away his diatom 25 years ago or more, and he wanted to give it back 2 months ago. I told him to keep it, old technology. Well, some old technology is still very sought after. Tell him, if you don't want it back, tell him that he can put it on eBay and he can get top dollar for it. If he can verify that it works and he's got all the parts, because they are sought after. Ask Denny. Denny was looking everywhere for them and got into a bidding war. So there you go. Is Cisse going to come out with a canister? That could be interesting. I've heard good things about the Oasis canister. I like their bigger units. Not sure I want a heater in the unit, but I did become more enthused when I found out that the heater had a separate plug-in, so it didn't have to be on all the time. You could actually run your heater through a controller, even though it's in the canister. So Oasis kind of thought it through. You are going to have to use 2 plugs, though, for that canister, but you'd have to use a plug for a heater anyway. But, yeah. I'd be curious to see that Cisse. Jay told me to think of she sells seashells by the seashore so I can pronounce Cisse. He also told me to think of seeing something. He went like this to me, Ben, Cisse. All right. So we're running over here. Thank you to anyone who did a super chat today. You are appreciated. Goes into the Save Lucy Fund. For those of you who were on earlier, I do have a beagle who's on meds right now, being treated for an open abscess that isn't healing on an ear, and I think she'll make a comeback. For 15 years old, she's doing amazing, and even the veterinarian was a little shocked when he listened to the lungs and heart. He just said this dog is in really good shape. We slightly underfeed our dogs. I have read a lot of research on how, reptiles, when they're slightly underfed, do live longer. So our dogs are kind of lean and mean. They're not fat dogs. And I think that's one of the reasons why she's in good shape at age 15. We also feed them very good food, usually organic food. For a while there, my wife was cooking food for them, but she got a little busy and we stopped doing that. But at any rate, Kev, old does not equal no good. And since I'm going to be 70 in January, I do agree, and I hope it's true. Thank you, my friends. You are the best. Thank you to my wonderful moderators. Thank you to my wonderful Patreon members for supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Thank you to Aquarium Co-op for your backup. Thank you to Cunningham Tropicals for your backup. And thank you to all you wonderful subscribers, those of you who watch my videos and give them thumbs up and subscribe and hit that bell and watch for a video this afternoon that will include clips from Corey at the Aquarium Co-op and John at KG Tropicals. All right. Thank you, my friends. I'll see you again next week at the same time. You rock. Don't forget, you rock. Bye-bye.